Hi everyone, Queeveen here from the comfort of my kitchen. In today's video, we are taking a look at one of the dwarf planets. So the dwarf planet Makemake is sort of the last dwarf planet, as in our current list of official dwarf planets, it is the last one. But Ceres, Pluto, Eris, Haumea, Makemake, these are really just the first dwarf planets. Various other objects like Koar, which I will hopefully pronounce better in the future, Sedna, Gong, all of these other objects are regularly considered to be dwarf planets, but official definitions do vary. I usually turn off the satellites because they are artificial man-made objects that really only get in the way when you're looking at stars and planets. But this one, an object this bright, moving this fast, and again, if we narrow down our field of view, as I mentioned in previous videos, the field of view at which I show the sky is not the field of view most people can see with their eyes, but we can see here, this object is clearly moving. And being so big and so bright, yeah, it's the ISS. This is the International Space Station. The best time to see the International Space Station is close to sunset, but we are looking into the future here, certainly the future from the date on which this was recorded. And the International Space Station is a man-made object. So while it's easy to predict where Venus and Saturn are going to be even years into the future, the International Space Station does have its motion altered. It can change exactly where it's orbiting the Earth, how high it is, it drops a little over time and then gets pushed back to a height. So all of these other things can make the ISS a little more difficult to predict, but there's a good likelihood that we will be able to see it at sunset over the next couple of evenings because of the way the ISS makes its passes. You very often get to see it twice in one night, though not always. Of course, there is a good chance that the ISS did pass overhead during that period of time. But if the ISS's large solar panels aren't catching the sunlight, you can see there when the ISS moves into the Earth's shadow, it's still there, we just can't see it because it's not reflecting that light. So we'll see if it comes over the horizon again later at night. Oh, it is briefly visible when it's quite high there above or next to Venus and Saturn, but we're so much later at night that the International Space Station will get into the Earth's shadow sort of much earlier in its passage across the sky. It disappeared way over here earlier in the evening. So that's a nice treat. The International Space Station is always nice to see. It's a very impressive object. And of course, it's a very impressive feat of human engineering. That's a whole lab with spaces for, 6 odd people to sleep in, orbiting around the Earth, something that was constructed in space from parts that were lifted off from the Earth at the International Space Station. Far too big to launch into space on its own, so it did have to be constructed in space, and that may be a theme for future space stations. Of course, we've only had a handful of space stations. Hopefully more will be created in the future. So here are our planets: Mars, Jupiter, Venus, Saturn. We've got Uranus over there, Neptune over there, and Mercury just under the horizon somewhere. Of course, we're looking at the dwarf planets, and to take a closer look at the dwarf planets, I'm going to push a little bit later. So there is the Plough or the Big Dipper, which means Coma Bernices, the hair of Bernice is over here somewhere. I'll quickly bring up the constellations. There it is, just under Canis Venatici or Venatici. So that is the hair of Bernice, Bernice's hair, one of the constellations. And that is roughly where Makemake is. A little bit underneath it, not too bad. I think it is still coming up. Yeah, COM there for Coma Bernices. Of course, the coma of a comet is kind of like a long ponytail stretched out behind it. This is how these words are connected. So this is Makemake, listed here as a dwarf planet, discovered in 2005. It is the second brightest trans-neptunian object. So that means that it is second brightest to Pluto. Pluto is brighter than Makemake, and it doesn't look like I'm getting any sort of image here, which is a little disappointing, given that we've got one for Haumea. But Haumea, a little bit bigger, a little bit more prominent, and I believe discovered a little bit earlier than Makemake as well. So Makemake is believed to be a dwarf planet. It is accepted as a dwarf planet, but it's not one of the sort of first 3. Ceres was considered an asteroid, Pluto was considered a planet, and then of course Eris kind of wrecked everything. You can check out my previous previous videos on Pluto and Eris if you'd like to learn more. And of course, I recently put up a video about Haumea as well, which was sort of the next one discovered, or the next one accepted to be a dwarf planet, and Makemake, the next one after that. So Makemake, of course, that's not how it would be pronounced in English. It would be Makemake, which is, you know, kind of a terrible name, or Makemake, which is also pretty bad. This name comes from Rapa Nui. So it is the language of Easter Island. Rapa Nui is Easter Island, off the coast of South America, but it's part of, you know, it's in the Pacific Ocean, and it is part of the same cultural group as a lot of the other Pacific Islands, including Hawaii, where we get the name Haumea from. So that oceanic family of languages has given names to a couple of different things in the sky here, and of course more and more hopefully in the future. Now, it's not showing up as actually visible here, of course. With light pollution and everything, it would be pretty tough, but I have been told that you can see this through a telescope, so let's get rid of the light pollution, and we'll just check again. Just in case I get a little bit of a dot this time. Unfortunately, I do not, but that's okay. These distant objects are incredibly difficult to observe, and very often they're not observed directly. So moving through time here, it could take a long time for it to actually happen. I know that it happened a couple of years ago. Oh, that's going under the Earth. Let's get rid of the ground and the atmosphere here just to make things a little bit better. And we're moving forward in time here, I believe. Okay, almost. So because Makemake isn't showing up as a dot, it's not going to obscure or occult the star as we're seeing it there. However, the occultation of a star by Makemake is one of the reasons why it was, or one of the ways in which it was measured and shown to not have much of an atmosphere. So let's fix this. Definitely not minus 2025. We're still on the first month, not the 12th, and we'll bring this back to, let's say, the 16th. There we go. So, Stellarium is more than capable of going all the way back to minus 999,999 years ago. But we don't want to see anything that far, that long ago. You know, if we could look that far into the future reliably, that would be a different story. So Makemake is among the last accepted dwarf planets, and who accepts what dwarf planets varies quite a lot. So I am going to quickly take a look here at some of the other objects that are regularly considered dwarf planets. Sedna is not. It's considered a sednoid here. Of course, Pluto is both a dwarf planet and a Plutino, because it's in that group that gets its name from Pluto. Let's try a couple of the other ones here. Orcus is considered a Plutino because that's the kind of orbit that it follows, a very similar orbit to Pluto. By some it is considered a dwarf planet. It's certainly considered a candidate dwarf planet. This may be a little difficult for me to spell, simply because it's spelt in a few different ways. There we go. So this is Quawar, which sounds terrible. It's not really Quawar. It's more like Quawar. I don't speak the endangered Tongva language of Central California. Unfortunately, not many people do, of course. But this is listed here as a Cubano or Cubano. I found it very difficult to pronounce this particular term, and there seems to be conflicting reports on how it should be pronounced. Of course, Quawar, if you want to pronounce it that way, these are loan words. These are names coming into English. It can be tough to pronounce things from different languages. But this is another one of the, discovered way back in 2002, another object that may be a dwarf planet. And this is where size really comes into play, because what defines a dwarf planet isn't just its size, it's hydrostatic equilibrium. It's whether or not it has become a solid ball, a solid object. Now, Makemake, I don't know if they're listed here, but Makemake does have two, or at least one moon. There's thought to be a moon orbiting around an object. Gives us a much better idea of its density and its mass. A moon orbiting around an object gives us a much better idea of its mass, and then its mass and its volume can be used to give us the density. And when an object has reached hydrostatic equilibrium, all of the air spaces and stuff have been squished out of the core, so it is more dense. With Makemake, it's got a moon orbiting around it, so we can make some estimations as to its density, whereas there are other objects that may be a similar size to Makemake or even larger, but without a moon orbiting around them, we don't know if they have fully consolidated on the inside or if they're still differentiated into various different materials. And that really is the question. Until we know how these objects are composed, it gets very hard to say for certain that they are a dwarf planet. Now, Quasar there is listed as a dwarf planet according to the International Astronomical Union, and it's not listed as a dwarf planet according to this. But different places have different definitions of a dwarf planet and different willingnesses to accept things. You know, we can talk about something as a candidate dwarf planet, and if people talk about something as a candidate dwarf planet for long enough, they may end up shortening it to just dwarf planet, even if that isn't wholly accurate. So, just a quick run through. I'm glad that we got to see the International Space Station there as well. I will be looping back around to talk about various other planets in the solar system. So if you weren't following this channel when I first spoke about Mercury and Venus, of course I encourage you to go back and take a look at my earlier videos, because I will be covering slightly different content, but I will be dealing with those inner planets and the other major planets of the solar system again in the future. So do like this video if you enjoyed this one, and subscribe to this channel if you'd like to see those future videos. You can also read some of this information on my website, queevinscontent.ie. Thank you for watching, and hopefully I'll see you back here next time.